Made to Kill. By Zekamp. Chapter 21 Traps for Rats. After getting some more details, Fayette and Mireille decided they needed to go have a look at the places the rats had been found in, and Elise volunteered as a guide. Soon she was leading the two through the streets. Fayette walked just a bit behind her with Mireille, and crept closer to talk quietly. "Hey, what's the real reason you didn't like the job at Angie's workplace? Were the conditions really that bad?" "Well, it didn't look like a pleasant place to work, that's for sure. Still, that was not really what put me off the whole place." Mireille looked around at the dilapidated streets they were walking and continued. "Honestly, I could handle poor working conditions for a while as long as the pay made up for it." Fayette was a bit surprised. "Really? Then what was the issue you had with the place?" Mireille sighed. "Well, it's something rather obvious in hindsight, but I only realized when I saw Ange working there. She really handled that sewing machine well, even had skills for it, and her class upgrade specialized in that direction." Fayette nodded at that. It made sense. One should specialize in their work. "Of course, what's the issue with that?" "Right, I can imagine it being a good for you," Mireille said. "But, it really unnerves me. The thing is, I won't ever be owning any of that factory machinery, will I? A normal seamstress only needs her needle and thread, and she can use all her skills. But, if that normal seamstress then starts taking skills that need a sewing machine to work, or other expensive things, they start relying on things they don't own themselves. You could get locked out of a big part of your skills. Having my class be tied in with something I can't hold," she shook her head. "I don't like it." Fayette walked in silence for a moment, pondering the words. It wasn't something she had ever thought of as a maid. The tools of her trade were rather simple to come by. But if one's class became highly specialized around some type of machinery, and they then lost access to that machinery, what could they do? Isn't that pretty similar to sailors? They don't own their boats either. Well, I wouldn't want to be a sailor either, to be honest. Maybe I could be a captain, if I could own the whole boat too." Fayette nodded. Mireille's words were sensible, and she could see her point. "All right, I understand now. What are you two whispering about back there?" Elise asked, finally noticing their conversation. "Oh, nothing much," Mireille said. "Just thinking about how we'll be handling these rats." Fayette focused her mind on the task ahead. "Right, pest control." The situation might have been bad for those living here, but Fayette could not hold back the bold smile that appeared on her face. Pest control, helping take out disease spreaders and doing something other than boring junior hunter missions. This was close to what she had been imagining in that sauna. A proper job for a maid, helping clear the places around them. They arrived at their destination, a food warehouse, one of the places that had been seeing the most rat incidents. Elise helped explain the situation to the owners, and they were quickly let in. Everyone was happy that someone was finally taking on the situation. The rats seemed to be a persistent sort. Holes and cracks in the walls and ground had been boarded up, but the critters had not cared. The boards had been chewed right through. Some damage even seemed very recent. A bag of grains lay half emptied out on the floor. "Are rats normally this fierce?" Mireille asked, looking over the damage. Fayette shook her head. "No, I don't think so. These seem abnormal. I'll up the dosage in the poisons to make sure it works." "Do you really know much about rat poison? I thought your alchemy skill was more about cleaning stuff." "Well, it's not like the skill only gives information on cleaning agents, that's just what the focus is on. Very basic alchemy knowledge applies similarly to everything, and I got some basic teaching on the subject. I should be able to make some workable stuff. Killing them is easy, getting them to eat the bait is the hard part." Fayette answered, pulling out a vial from her apron. Mireille nodded, taking out her own tools. "I'll work out some snares then. I wonder how big I should make these." They quickly got to work. Fayette began brewing some poison using her alchemy tools, while Mireille began rigging up some stealthy snares. "Are you two really just a maid and a seamstress?" Elise asked. She had been watching their work diligently, twirling her braid around every now and then. Fayette finished applying the poison on a bit of stale bread chosen for bait, and quirked an eyebrow at her. "Why wouldn't we be? It's just, all, this." The laborer vaguely gestured at the poison and snares. Isn't this like actual proper hunter stuff? Setting up traps and brewing poisons." Fayette almost looked offended. "Well, I am an actual proper hunter, I'll have you know. I even have a license. Of course my methods would be proper. But didn't you want to do this under the table? Not through the Hunters Guild?" Well, that's just a whole separate matter, all right? I just have some disagreements with their paper pushers, they get all fussy about rules and whatnot." Elise slowly nodded her head. All right. I get what you're saying. You won't get in trouble for this, right?" Fayette stopped. "It'll probably be fine, I think." Mireille raised her head, away from the snare she had been making. She narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean probably? We are getting paid, right?" Fayette shrugged her shoulders. "Probably." Mireille sighed. "I knew I should have come with you to the guild. Still, what they don't hear can't hurt them. If we quietly solve this issue, quietly get paid and the request quietly gets pulled at the guild, we should be fine." Fayette relaxed. "I can do quiet." Hey, nobody from the Hunters Guild had shown up for 2 weeks, but now you two did. I don't think people here are feeling too grateful for the guild. "They'll help you out," Elise offered. "Well, that sounds well and good," Mireille said, rising up to stand from her snares. "I think I'm done with snares for this place, how about you, Faye?" "I've still got one more to go," she answered, busy lathering more poison inside bait. It didn't take her long to finish. However, she was a bit surprised by the notification that followed. "Wow, you're getting real experimental with the spices. Keep up the good cooking. Progress towards next level, 55%. Fayette stopped still in her tracks and narrowed her eyes. "Hey, wait a minute here, I'm not cooking anything here. Don't connect my spices to this. Are you implying my spices are?" "No. Faye, you are right?" "You froze up." The maid stumbled for a moment, then looked at her concerned friend. "All right, I definitely can't mention this to Mireille, she'll never eat anything I cook again." "Oh, it's nothing. Just had an errant thought." Mireille looked doubtful, but didn't push further. Fayette put her rat poison back inside a pouch. "I think I'm done too." Mireille nodded. "All right, let's head out to the next spot then. Elise, lead the way if you would." Their group went through a few more places, placing traps and rat bait in strategic spots. Fish markets, houses in disrepair, food stalls, the rats had been in many places. Mireille had been quiet for the last few spots, seemingly lost in thought. Fayette poked her in the back. "What's got you brooding all dark like?" "Gah! Don't poke there." She glared at Fayette. "For one thing, how much exactly did it cost you to make that rat poison? You are using it quite a lot." "I don't really know, to be honest, I haven't bought any new ingredients for a while. These were all from my stockpile, so I can't really estimate. You need to think of these things if you are going to be a real hunter. It's a job that costs money to do, so you need to keep track of your resource expenses. As far as I'm concerned, as long as I get my experience, I'm good." Mireille did not look too pleased at the answer. "I guess you really do need me around, don't you? If you go at this alone, you'll be bankrupt in a month." Fayette opened her mouth to protest, but Mireille silenced her with a gesture. "Enough, that's not the thing I'm really worried about." "It's not?" "No, I've been thinking on our mission. All these spots, they cover quite the distance. How are these rats getting around? Elise perked up at the question. She had been silent as she listened to the pair's conversation and seemed eager to contribute. Oh, I forget you two are not from around here. The rats are probably moving through the Undercity. Two pairs of curious eyes turned to her. Undercity? They both asked at the same time. Yes, the Undercity. Elise answered. Fayette started staring at the ground and pointed at it. Like, there's a whole city under there. Elise laughed. Oh, no, nothing grand like that. It's just some old mining tunnels and catacombs that run under the city. This place used to be a mining hotspot, but eventually the city expanded and the mines got left underneath. It's just called the Undercity because it's under the city. Fayette nodded. Under the city, so it's the Undercity. That makes sense. Elise nodded back and continued. Some parts of it were used as catacombs some time back when the graveyards ran out of space, and other parts are used for all sorts of different things. I remember when I was a kid, there were always rumors going around about scary stuff being down there. Those were just rumors, right? Fayette asked, suddenly more alert as she looked at the ground. Oh, I don't know. I never went to check. Elise asked. She lowered her voice and looked at the maid conspiratorially. I still remember the tales of the Face Snatcher, a horrific beast that stalks the darkness with a bag full of heads. The creature has a pole that it puts the heads on, and if you see one of the heads peeking from behind a corner while you are down there. Fayette had started to get absorbed in the story, so she jumped up quite a distance when Mireille suddenly poked her in the neck. Hey! What was that for? She's having you on, don't let some ghost stories scare you. Elise laughed. Hey, I think it's quite the good story. Mireille turned to look at the ground below them. I hope our poison and snare tactic works out. Sounds like it would be very bothersome to head down there. The group went through a few more spots before they called it quits. Mireille and Fayette said their goodbyes to Elise and promised to meet up the next day to check on things. The pair headed back to their inn, and after a hearty dinner, retired to sleep. Fayette woke up the next day to a slew of notifications. Efficient pest control, good job. Level up, you have reached Maid level 11. Congratulations. 1. Skill point gained. You have gained a new skill, spicy cooking. Progress towards next level, 15%. Nice, looks like the trap worked. A new skill too. However, her thoughts continued on as she noticed a curious detail. Wait a minute. I've done pest control before. It was not this much. That is a lot of experience for some rats. What exactly are we dealing with here? Chapter 22 Complications. Fayette shuffled off the bed and rushed to wake up Mireille. The seamstress groggily opened her eyes as the maid shook her. All right, I'm waking up, what's the... Mireille paused in the middle of her sentence, and Fayette smiled as she knew what Mireille had paused for. You got them too, right? The notifications. Mireille took a few more seconds to parse things, then smiled back at Fayette. All right, it looks like our ploy worked out. She hopped out of bed, then her face furrowed. Wait a minute, is this much experience normal for some rats? My traps don't usually give this much. Fayette nodded. I noticed it too, something's definitely weird about this, but whatever. I got a new skill. She rushed to make her bed and put on her uniform, managing it in record time. Soon the pair were out of the door. They chose to skip breakfast for today, as the excitement of their first successful job as hunters carrying them forward. Fayette still took some bread along, though she needed to experiment. Fayette checked on her new skill as she walked. Spicy cooking. A maid who specializes in cooking of the spicy variety, a most useful skill indeed. Spice up all your food easily, in one simple step. No more need for those bothersome spice merchants. Nice, this one will definitely push my cooking to the next level. Hey, Mireille, check this out. Fayette took a piece of bread from her pockets, then held it out. She focused on her new skill, willing it to act on the bread. Spicy cooking. A flash went through the bread, but no visible change came to it. Fayette tore a piece off, and bit into it. Ooh, nice, it really did get spicy. How useful. She tore off another piece and offered it to Mireille. Here, you can have one too. No, thank you, but I'm fine. I ate already. No, you didn't. Besides, don't you want to see how my new skill works? Mireille looked at the piece of bread dubiously. You know, based on that skill name and your expression while eating that bread, I'm pretty sure I know exactly how it works. Ah, but you can't be sure, right? Well, fine. If you'll stop pestering me on it. Mireille took a small bite, then threw the rest of the bread away, grimacing. Exactly as I imagined. Hey! Don't litter! Fayette stopped to pick up the piece of bread and stored it in one of her pockets. She would dispose of it properly later. So, how exactly is that going to help your hunting career? Mireille asked. Now that you say it, I'm not really sure. I'll figure out something though, don't you worry. Mireille scoffed. Well, I'll look forward to it too, then. I didn't get any new ability yet, sadly. Maybe I need more fighting experience. I'm sure you'll get something good soon. Well, I hope so too. It was only a short walk to their first target, the food warehouse they had started off with. However, a concerning detail arose as they arrived to check their traps. The poisoned bits of bread were gone, and the snares had been used. There were even traces of blood on the floor. However, there was not one trace of the rats themselves. No corpses were where they were supposed to be. The pair stared at the conspicuously empty warehouse floor for a moment, then turned to each other. There was a long bit of silence, which Mireille eventually broke. Hey, Fayette. We were going to get paid for every rat corpse we brought in, right? Yes, that is what they said. Mireille turned back to look at the triggered snares. Well, where are they? We got the notifications, right? Where are my rat bodies? Did they take them away? Eat them? Is that something that rats do? Do you think we'll be able to get paid anyways? We did kill rats, the notifications proved it. Fayette tried. Mireille let loose a long sigh. I really don't think that's going to be good enough. They'll want assurances that the issue is actually being dealt with. The word of some dubious rookie hunters is hardly convincing. Fayette let her gaze wander through the warehouse, eventually landing at some cracks by a back wall. The cracks were large, deep, and dark fissures, and Fayette knew where they led. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? She asked. Mireille nodded. Those rats are not taking my money. I'll get them for this. It was time for a direct assault, it was time to head to the Undercity. Fayette and Mireille immediately set off to Elisa's house to discuss things further. They needed more information, and the girl seemed oddly knowledgeable about this stuff. It was still the early morning, so they hoped to catch her before her shift at work. Elise was a bit surprised to see the two knocking at her door so early in the morning, but she quickly hustled them inside. The woman tried to start brewing tea for the group, but somehow Fayette ended up taking over again. So, there are issues with this whole rat situation, I take it? She asked as she watched Fayette pour tea into 3 cups. Well, yeah. These are definitely not normal rats we are dealing with here. Mireille said, a frown on her face. Oh? How so? Mireille took up a cup of tea for herself. Well, we should have realized something was wrong right this morning, when we got notifications for our kills. You got kill notifications? Isn't that a good thing? Fayette took a long sip from her cup, then sighed. Yes, it is a good thing. We were both pretty happy at it, because we got a lot of experience. However, it was really too much experience. Elise seemed puzzled at that, and silently sipped at her own cup, waiting for an explanation. Mary continued. The thing is, normal rats shouldn't be giving that much experience, even with how many traps we had set. Fayette, you've done pest removal before, right? The maid nodded. Yeah, I've dealt with some moles and mice before, but the experience gain was nothing like it was today. It pushed me all the way from early level 10 to 11. Elise's eyes widened. That is a lot of experience. It would take me months of work at the mill to make similar progress. Morel nodded. Right, I got a level up too from it. Really the whole thing is. Did you get any cool new skills? Elise interrupted, eyes shining. I bet hunters get all sorts of cool abilities, right? Mary was struck silent by the sudden interruption, but Fayette took no notice. Oh yeah, I did get a skill, spicy cooking. Don't know how much use it'll be, but... Fayette! Mary shouted as she slammed her cup on the table. She gave the maid a severe glare. Don't just go blabbing about skills to everyone, okay? A hunter can't be doing things like that. The maid's eyes widened as she realized her mistake. She turned to Elise with an awkward smile. So, anyways, I didn't get any new skill at all, nope. It was just... It's fine, sorry. Elise said, blushing slightly. I shouldn't have asked. It's just that you guys are actually like fighting stuff. Doing real things. Not just endless dull labor. Fayette looked at the earnest woman, then turned to Morel. Hey, it should be fine to talk to her about this, right? Mire looked divided for a moment, but eventually relented. Fine. All right, it should be all right. But... She turned to Elise and pointed a decisive finger at her face. Elise, we need information on the Undercity. I am not letting those rats get away with my righteous pay. The laborer smiled. Thanks, I appreciate it. She went silent for a few seconds as she thought. As a kid, I wanted to be an explorer. A childish dream, but I did end up snooping around a lot, learning a lot, but I'm not really sure I know how to explain it all. She turned away for a bit, fidgeting. She seemed to be gathering courage for something, and eventually turned a hesitant look to the two hunters. Do you think I could come along as a guide? Fayette nodded. Sure, I suppose there's no harm in getting a GUID. Now wait just a minute. Mire interrupted, blocking Fayette off with her hand. She carefully examined Elise, and the laborer began fidgeting under her eye. Elise, what level are you? Elise stopped fidgeting, and slowly answered. Well, I just recently got to level 14. Mire slumped down, leaning on her hand. Oh, great. One of those cases. Chapter 23 Down into the Undercity. Wait, what cases? Fayette asked, looking between the two. Class up anxiety. Mire replied, and Elise back winced from the words. What's that? Fayette asked, still not understanding. Mire sighed. Remember when caretaker Levine started being super nice and active with everyone? Ooh, I remember that. She started making all sorts of new foods and taking us all out to play. Did it for a while, then suddenly stopped. Mire nodded. Right, I overheard later that she had just hit level 15, and only gotten common class options. Ouch, that's gotta hurt. Right, so she held back from class upping, tried for a while to be better, and to get something more. Didn't work usually, doesn't, from what I hear. Got depressed afterwards. A common thing, apparently. Fayette turned to Elise. You're nervous about your class up. The woman had sat still, winding her braid up tight as she had listened to the two. Her expression had grown embarrassed. She looked at the two in front of her. You two don't get nervous. No, Fayette instantly answered. I have faith in myself. No point worrying about stuff like that. A bit. Mireille admitted. Though I don't worry too much. Something I'll deal with when it comes. Elise sighed, then slumped down onto the table. Well, I can't help it. She raised her head up, looking towards her bedroom. Ange tried for a few years to get an uncommon class, and never managed it. My time is coming up soon, but my life has been as common as can be. I like leveling fast. My progress slowing down so much from the penalty I don't want it. Mother got a common class, and she's only barely reaching level 30 now. So, you think this would be special enough, uncommon enough to raise you up? Fayette asked. Elise pointed at her two guests. Look at you two. A maid and a seamstress, just doing this kind of stuff. Like it was natural. Why not a laborer too? Fayette frowned in thought. She didn't really know whether a laborer could do such things, she hadn't gone on her path for such reasons after all. She was first and foremost a maid, and would always be so in the future. She was only going rat hunting in the Undercity because that was where her path as a maid had brought her. Would the path of a laborer lead there too? Or was that forcing things too much? I don't know. She finally said. What do you think, Mireille? I think she might as well come along. Mireille was still examining Elise quietly, not saying a word. Look, it's not just about the levels. Elise finally said. I mean, it's about them too, but I want to do something. Something to really help people. This is a real issue here. If you two can do something, why not me? Mireille. Fayette said, turning to her friend. It's not like you've got a lot of experience on her either, right? We're all pretty new to this. Except me, of course. Hardly the veteran yourself. Mireille shot back. 2 weeks ago I was listening to you mope about how stupid and mean your head maid was. Well, she's certainly not so anymore. The seamstress sighed. Well, fine. I guess we could use an extra pair of hands. Yay. Thanks for having me, I'll try hard to be useful. Elise shouted out, jumping up from her seat. Fayette smiled too. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but she would at least give this woman a chance. The group agreed to head out to the Undercity after Elise got done with her shift at work, which would give Fayette and Mireille some time to make preparations of their own. They walked off towards the market district in search of supplies. So, are you sure this is a good idea? Mireille asked as they walked. Is there an issue? Fayette answered. Well, this whole taking Elise along thing. Will it really work out? Mireille said, casting a glance backwards. That girl's head has been clearly filled with some foolish stories, so she's in a rush to try them out. This is proper hunter stuff, we can't just take anyone along. Well, she said her skills were good for endurance and carrying things around, so even if she can't fight much, she should be useful. Fayette pointed out. Mireille sighed. Well, I guess you are right. So, do you have any special needs for going down there? We could split up for the supply shopping. Fayette thought for a moment. I guess we'll need something to light the way. Maybe an oil lamp? A few of them? Other than that, I think I'm pretty much set. If you are adamant about going in that uniform, then I guess you really are, Mireille said, looking over Fayette's clothes. She turned to look at herself. I think I'll need to prepare some clothing better suited for this stuff. If these rats are carrying diseases, I don't want them biting me. Something thick for the legs, probably. Fayette walked on silently for a moment, then turned to Mireille with a curious expression. Say. I think we've been neglecting something obvious here. Mireille turned from her clothes, curious about what the maid had noticed. Well, what is it? Fayette looked Mireille in the eye. We're going to deal with rats, so why don't we get a cat? Mireille missed a step. She managed to stop herself from stumbling, and steadied her walking. She turned away, seeming to give the idea serious consideration. You know, Fayette, now that you say it, that is indeed something. Not sure what, but something. They walked in silence for a moment longer before Mireille shook her head. All right, I don't think it'll work out. First, we would need to get a cooperative cat from somewhere. Second, I doubt a cat would be able to deal with these rats we have been handling. Wasn't there some talk of dogs being found dead? Fayette frowned. She had really hoped they could have gotten a cat. All right, fine, I guess. If it won't work, it won't work. Mireille nodded. Okay, I will head out to buy some supplies of my own. I want to try using wire for this. We'll need to test things a bit. Can you handle the more general stuff? In addition to a lamp, could you get some rope? Always bring rope. I'm pretty sure that's a saying. Always bring rope, Fayette muttered to herself. I do think I've heard that somewhere. It is probably a saying. Mireille tapped the maid on the back. Let's meet up at the inn later. Fayette nodded at her, and they separated. The maid walked on silently as a lone thought remained in her mind. I really had hoped we could get the cat. Later in the evening, a party of 3 were standing by a busy street in front of an unassuming-looking door, which led into a stone wall. Mireille had put on thick hose and sturdy boots to stay the rodent bites. Elise had chosen to come in her work clothes, a simple but sturdy outfit with some light protective gear. Mireille nodded approvingly at her thick leather gloves and sturdy boots. The laborer had also brought along a simple broom for a weapon. Fayette nodded approvingly at that. The maid, meanwhile, was of course wearing her maid uniform. She stood out quite a bit compared to the other 2. It was difficult to picture her as part of the same adventurous group, despite her being arguably the most capable. Fayette took out a lantern from her apron of holding and lit it. It cast a light into the dark doorway, revealing the stairs that led downwards. Is this really the place? She asked, looking at the entrance doubtfully. It felt strange to her that such an entrance would just be in the middle of a busy street like this, under broad daylight. Elise nodded. It's no mistake, this is it. These were used as official catacombs for a while, you know. Of course the entrances would be easily accessible. Fayette handed the lantern to Elise. She took it in her hand. An ethereal hand spouted from her side, and took it, leaving her other 2 hands free. That extra hand of yours seems pretty useful. Mireille said, studying it closely. Elise motioned at their packs. You can give me anything extra that needs carrying. My carrying capacity will help with that. I'll definitely be useful. Not much need for that, my apron of holding serves the same purpose. Thanks for the offer though. Fayette answered. Elise sighed. Not many of my skills are that useful here. Store sleep and energizer work wonders for shift work, but don't do too much on an undercity raid. We'll see, let's proceed inside then. Mireille said, beginning to direct the group. She motioned at Fayette. Faye, you stay in the front, while I bring up the rear. Elise, could you stay in the middle and make sure to light our path? The 3 moved into the pattern and started descending down the stairs. It was a long, dreary, and damp stairwell, and the little light they had did not reveal the end. It was a bit of a walk down them, the air steadily getting colder and more damp, but it wasn't too long. They soon reached the end of the stairwell, where a door opened into a sizable, dark stone room. Fayette could just barely make out the edges of the room, where bare stone walls were filled with worn engravings. She moved to step in, but Mireille interrupted her. Hey, don't just go rushing in like that. We have to do this carefully. Fayette cast a glance backwards and shrugged. What? You expect the rats to have like an ambush right here or something? There's no way. She looked back towards the room and continued walking through the doorway. They would probably be guarding their nest or something. We'll really have to search for the Fayette stopped as her danger sense flared. It took her half a second to make out the blurry, small shape rushing at her. She kicked at it, and felt her boot hitting soft fur, and the shape was thrown back away. Silence returned. Fayette watched the doorway carefully. These are some energetic rats. Chapter 24 Whirlwind Battle. Fayette peered into the doorway, looking for any sign of the creature she had just kicked away. That was a fast one. Without my danger sense, I would have been completely caught out. She eventually said. Did you get a good look at it? Mireille asked, eyes searching through the room. Was it one of our targets? There was something strange about how it looked. It was kind of blurry. I couldn't really make it out at all. Mireille thought for a moment. Could it be a monster? That sounds like some sort of skill. Elise, you didn't tell us anything about monsters being here. The laborer flinched. There's not supposed to be any monsters down here. We used to come here as kids, there wasn't anything like that. Mireille frowned. I guess we should have expected something like this with how abnormal these rats have seemed. Do you see anything in there, Faye? The maid kept her eyes focused to the front. Nope, nothing. Should we go forward? I could maybe try something that should help clear the room. Do you think we can handle them? This might get dangerous. Fayette paused, considering. I think we can handle them. It was fast and hard to spot, but didn't seem that strong. If we're alert, we should be able to do this. Elise, what do you think? You are the one new to this. Ready to face some maybe monsters. If you two can, then I'll do it too. Elise replied, holding her broom ready. The seamstress nodded. All right. These seem like troublesome sorts, so let's do this carefully room by room. She gestured at the different exits from the room. I'll put up a grid of wire over each exit as we move, which should keep things contained. You'll need to do most of the clearing, while Elise supports you. All right. Elise nodded and gripped her broom tighter. All right. Fayette did not nod, but began activating an ability. This is my first try at this, so we'll see how it goes. Try not to get any of this on you. Fayette held her left hand out, and began focusing on her spicy cooking skill. Before, she had used it to spice up food directly efficient, but not what she needed here. I want to spice things up more generally. Just give me the stuff itself. The ability activated, going on cooldown for a while, and a handful of red spice appeared in her hand. Fayette tested it out with a lick and flinched back at the spiciness. This is like pure, concentrated spice. She looked at the powder with whole new eyes. So delicious. This is such a useful skill. She then looked at the dusty room around her and sighed. Such a shame to waste good spice, but, well, here goes nothing. She threw the spice onto the ground in front of her and took hold of her broom with both hands. She activated sweep dust. The spicy powder, along with a whole bunch of dust in the room, got sucked into a swirling vortex around her broom. Fayette focused on maintaining the vortex, not interrupting it for a release. She felt the ability losing power, so she knew that she couldn't tarry. All right, I'll clear out all the nooks and crannies here with this, should knock our friends out well enough. Elise, Morel, finish them off for me, would you? She didn't wait for a response, and moved into the room. She jumped out, running the red-tinged vortex of dust along the edges of the room. Mireille and Elise followed behind her. It didn't take long for her to get her first catch. As she approached the first corner of the room, she again felt her danger sense flare up. The presence coming from the corner she was approaching, so she didn't slow down. No, she rushed in faster and pushed the broom. A shape tried to rush through it, but once it got mixed in with the dust and spice, it lost its bearing and crashed to the ground, disoriented. Fayette stomped on it, then continued moving. She trusted that Mireille and Elise could finish it off for her. Next, she had to move past a doorway, and her danger sense flared again. How smart exactly are these things? Now they're just rushing at me when I get close. Strange. Got two coming here. She shouted and swept out her broom through the doorway. She managed to hit one creature, but another one had ran along just beneath her cloud of spice. It moved in fast, closing in on Fayette's leg. However, just as it was about to reach her, a needle pierced its hide and hooked through, pulling it back. Watch out, Faye, this one almost got you. Mireille shouted as she tugged the creature back into Elisa's waiting broom, which smacked it down on the ground. Fayette made sure the other creature got plenty of the spice on it and left it behind, disoriented. The maid kept moving, she could feel her hold on the ability fading. She would have to release it soon. She swept another corner, and encountered no resistance. However, as she moved to run at the next doorway, she felt her danger sense flare up stronger than it had so far. Much stronger. She looked out, and saw that at least 5 of the creatures were rushing at their group from the other side of the room. Bloody hell, that's a bunch. Guess I angered them. Well, no time better I guess. She finally released her sweep dust. She had managed to cover almost half of the room with it, so the amount of dust she had gathered into the vortex was quite significant. She swung her broom out in an arc and the spicy dust flew out, covering the whole other half of the room. The effect would be diluted with the thing spread out over such a large area, but at least she could ensure that she hit everything. We've got lots more incoming. Watch out! She shouted, as she turned her broom around in her hand. She cast a quick glance back and saw that Mireille had managed to cover one of the entrances with her wire net, while Elise was finishing off one of the creatures Fayette had left behind. Best I give them a minute. Fayette turned back, and saw her cloud of dust sweep the room. Several blurry figures were revealed as they were coated in the stuff, making their blur effect useless. She could see them stumble around, disoriented by the assault on their senses. Fayette moved in. She ran in fast, and jumped on top of one creature, while at the same time batting at another with her broom. She felt the crunch under her boot at the same time as her broom splat the other one onto the floor. The creatures were confused, but recovering. She needed to act quick. She activated cutlery control, and let it pull knives from her pockets into her right hand, which she then threw out at the more distant foes. More were appearing, figures revealed by the dust. She managed to hit 3, and the knife slid into the enemies smoothly, injuring, though not killing. Nice, at least they are easier than kobold scales. However, by now the creatures had recovered from the spice, and 3 of them rushed at Fayette. She waited calmly, and batted at the centermost one with her broom. The one to the left was snared by a needle passing through it, while the rightmost one got smashed in by Elisa's broom. Fayette's allies had also gotten time to move in for the support. The room was silent. Efficient pest control, good job. Experience shared with party. Progress towards next level, 45%. Mireille looked around warily. Was that all of them? What do you think, Faye? The maid thought for a moment. I've gotten my spice over every nook and cranny of this room, so we should have flushed them all out. I think this room is clear. The seamstress nodded. All right, I'll move and secure the entrances. Keep an eye out for trouble. As she rushed to rig up the next entrance, Elise slumped down, leaning on her broom. That was. Is it always like this? It felt so close to going bad. I didn't manage to do much of anything at all. I guess it's tough for a beginner, though you did carry the lantern. Fayette replied. Elise flinched and looked up at the maid. I guess I'm mostly good for carrying stuff then. Not too surprising. Fayette thought for a moment. What type of advice would a proper veteran hunter give here? She smiled. Next time, just focus on hitting them with the broom. I think you got 3, right? That's decent. Elise stood up and smacked her cheeks. Okay, I can do this. Just focus on the broom. All right. Fayette left the laborer to her mutterings and turned to examine the creatures they had just fought. The blur effect seemed to fade with their death, but curiously, the corpses were still remaining behind. Are they not monsters after all? I could have sworn. Fayette took a closer look and saw that they definitely looked like rats. Big rats. Though, there was something wrong with the bodies. She felt an instinctual enmity with them, a distaste from deep within. Something was wrong here. She peered in for a closer look. Chapter 25 Investigation. Fayette poked one of the rats over with her broom, and saw that while the top of the rat thing was whole, its underside had begun to dissolve. Hey, Mireille, are you done? Soon. Is something wrong? It's these rat creatures. There's something wrong with them. Fayette waited for Mireille to finish, and when pointed out her finding when the woman joined her. Look, it's like, half dissolved or something. Is that a thing? Half monster or whatever? Mireille frowned, and sent out her needle to prod at the corpse. Strange. I haven't heard of anything like this before. Could it be oh? Fayette turned to her. Did you find something? The seamstress frowned in concentration. There's something hard in here. Wait just a moment. Fayette turned back to the rat creature and saw Mireille dig at it more with her needle. Eventually, after a bit more digging, she looped her thread around something and pulled it out. At first, Fayette thought it was a monster core. However, that thought was quickly dispelled as she saw the living matter melded with the gem-like stone. At some point, Elise had joined them in their examination. She was staring at the creature with fascination. Is that its heart? Look how it's melded with this. No, is it turning into the gemstone? Fayette frowned. That seemed to be what was happening, but everyone knew that monsters were spat out from hell, deep underground to torment the world above. She had never heard of anything like this, creatures turning into monsters. Fayette, you have some monster cores, right? Mireille asked. Can you bring one out? Let's compare. That seemed an alright idea, so Fayette brought out one from her pouch. It was a red-brown gemstone, small enough to fit snugly into her hand. She placed it next to the heart gem thing, and examined the two. Everyone spent some time poking, prodding, and looking hard at the things, but the conclusion was unmistakable. So, I think it's pretty clear that something here is slowly turning ordinary rats into monsters, Mireille said at last. Fayette slowly nodded, accepting the idea. It might go against common sense, but there was no denying what she saw in front of her eyes. She gripped her broom tighter. This job might be trickier than we expected. A silence fell over them, and the three women stared warily into the corridors that opened from their first room. They seemed more foreboding now. Dangerous. Something truly wrong was going on down here. The silence lingered for quite a while, as they all brooded on the situation. Are you sure we should be continuing with this? Mireille eventually said, looking at Fayette. We could leave and alert people about what's going on. The maid thought for a moment. True, it was much more than she had signed up for. A higher level of danger. She might have agreed to leave if she was a normal hunter. She only had the junior license, and she didn't think the guild would be too pleased about hearing what she had been doing here. Besides, even if she managed to get away with it, it would be back to slime extermination or something equally dull. She made her decision. No, I'm finishing what I started. I think we should at least find out what's causing this, she eventually said, turning to the other two. Do you have any idea on how we could track the source down? Elise frowned for a moment, before shaking her head. This place is pretty expansive, we might just have to do it the long way. Mireille waited for her to finish, looking proud of herself. Don't worry, I've got a solution for us. She announced. Oh, really? Fayette gestured at her. Do tell. I've had the foresight to keep one of my free skill slots, well, free. I've been keeping a throwaway skill on it, just for situations like this. I've just swapped in basic tracking for it. Elise looked at her, surprised. You keep a slot open like that? Doesn't it feel really bad if you swap skills like that? And you'll never be able to get the previous skill back, doesn't that worry you? The seamstress brushed her off. It's only painful if you let the skill integrate too much. As long as you don't use it much, don't hold it for long and don't put any skill points in it, the process isn't too bad. At least once you get used to it. But what about the lost potential? You'll never get the first skill back. Mireille waved the concern away. Not really a problem, most people stick to only one skill anyway, leaving all the others off. There are so many free skills, it doesn't really matter if you lock out a few every now and then. Selections can be pretty versatile if you really get to it. I can think of 3 skills that I could use to locate these rats. Selecting one now and then switching it away isn't too bad. Really? Elise responded, eyes wide with a new type of respect. But how do you get so many different ones? My selections didn't feel that versatile. The seamstress seemed to puff up, delighted to extol her wisdoms. It's simple really, just ask people how they think they unlocked theirs. People are all hush-hush about class skills, but strangely, well, free about their free skills. Ask loads of people how it's done, then try to get the requirements. Works surprisingly well. Fayette rolled her eyes as Elise and Mireille kept at it, falling deeper into the conversation. She wasn't too impressed with tricks like those. Might as well just get a proper good skill right away. Being skittish like that is bound to be trouble eventually. She clacked her broom on the floor twice, taking back the stage. All right, you've got your new skill. Get to tracking now, would you? We've rats to catch. I will. It's just Mireille closed her eyes for a moment. I need to get used to using this. It takes a bit of practice, okay. Fine, you do that. Fayette said, then looked through the room. Her spice dust mix had been sent all over, and it would be a waste to just leave it all behind. A proper maid was economical with things. She started gathering up all the dust in the room into one big pile. Mireille was muttering to herself, staring at one of the corpses. Elise looked a bit lost for a moment, but eventually went to stand guard over the entrance. It didn't take long for Fayette to gather up all the dust on the floor, and it really made a difference. Elaborate stonework had been hiding under the dust, and now revealed, it really brightened up the place. Fayette took up a lantern and turned to examining the walls. This was only an entrance room, so it held no sarcophagi or skulls as the proper catacomb rooms no doubt did. The light from the lantern revealed worn walls, dirty with grime. A shame, this place could really look nice if someone actually maintained it. Fayette took out a rag and started polishing up the walls. It really was a shame that a place that had once been built with lots of effort had eventually been left to rot. Why, it wouldn't take me too much effort to really get this place down. I'll need some more water, maybe a bit of all-purpose cleaner, and then... Fayette. We are not cleaning up the catacombs, do you hear? The maid turned to Mireille, frowning. Why not? It would only be a bit. Besides, you needed some time, right? I'll just fetch some. No, I'm done. I figured out the general direction they were moving in. We're not getting paid to clean this stuff up, so we're not doing it. Take it up with the Lord or something. I guess that is true. I would be overstepping if I began to really clean up here. If I see that Lord, I'll have to give him a piece of my mind about the state he's left things in. He should really hire some catacomb maids to keep this place in order. I wonder, is there a catacomb maid class? That could be cool. She sighed. Fine, we're not doing it. Which way is our target? Mireille pointed to the leftmost corridor from the entrance. Those creatures were moving mainly from that direction. Elise, do you know what's down there? The laborer thought for a moment. That takes us upriver, out of this district. I don't think the catacombs extend that far over there, it just becomes a tangle of abandoned mine shafts. Fayette slowly walked to the corridor, sweeping her pile of dust along with her. Mireille went forward to clear the wires she had set up over the entrance, and Elise brought in the lantern. The three moved forward, now practiced and ready with their formation. Chapter 26 Pollution. It was a short walk to the next room, and soon another chamber was revealed through the bare passage. This next room had skulls lining the walls, though they were so covered in grime a lot of the effect was lost. Nothing that dusty could look too fearsome. Fayette only had a moment to contemplate polishing them up before her danger sense flared up again. Incoming. Only two. Her pile of spicy dust was a lot bigger this time, so when she activated sweep dust and sent it into the room, it managed to blanket the whole space. Two blurry figures were revealed by the dust adhering to their forms. The group moved in. This time their teamwork was more practiced. Fayette moved forward and dealt with anything that got close, while Mireille followed up with ranged strikes which tied up the more difficult targets. Elise followed as rearguard, watching their back and finishing off the tied-up and disoriented enemies. It didn't take them even half a minute to clear the room of all 5 rat monsters that had been hiding in it. Nice removal, keep it up. Experience shared with party. Progress towards next level, 60%. The three stopped to catch their breaths. There was only one corridor leading out from this room. Fayette looked to her companions. Are you ready to move on? The other two took a moment more to settle down, before nodding. Fayette took up the lead again. They proceeded forwards. The next room was cleared faster, and the one after that had no rodents in it at all. Mireille debated setting up wires behind them so that they would be safe from ambushes, but that would have been risky if a retreat became necessary. After some discussion, they decided on a compromise. She would only set up wires low enough that they would be able to jump over them when escaping. Fayette threw more spice into her dust pile when spicy cooking came off cooldown, around 7 rooms into their run. She learned a few of the limits of the skill while doing this. The spices couldn't be too far away from her, or they would disappear. She also felt like there was a time limit to it, though not one she had hit yet. The spice was more volatile on its own, the stuff she had added to her bread was still there, but she could already feel the pure spice nearing its end. They encountered nothing strange for a good while, just more and more rats. They never assembled in groups too big to handle, and only seemed to have rudimentary intelligence. The catacombs continued on and on, a vast labyrinth of stone and bone. Fayette really wished she could have cleaned the place more as they moved, but she knew it wouldn't be right. She would have to seek permission first. Still, her growing dust pile meant that the floors at least were much cleaner than before. I think I'll settle on polishing some skulls on our breaks. Things changed after the 7th room they cleared. Fayette stomped on one last rat and smiled at the notification she got. Good combo, don't stop. Experience shared with party. Level up, you have reached Maid level 12. Congratulations. 1 skill point gained. Progress towards next level, 10%. Good, this has been worthwhile just for the experience. I have 2 free skill points now. Mireille always keeps one in reserve. Maybe I should do the same? I wonder what I should put it in. She was honestly really liking her spicy cooking skill. Yes, it may have been better to think things through more, but more spicy spice? More spice in general? Once the idea popped up in her head, she didn't hesitate. Best not mention this to Mireille or she's going to make it a whole difficult debate or something. Skill up, spicy cooking has reached rank 2. She focused on the skill, and felt that her control over it was better, more precise. She could differentiate between levels of spice now. Naturally, she turned it on full throttle. Max spiciness, go. A new pile appeared in her hand, this one more red than before. She took a good look at the pile. It would be going on the floor anyway, why couldn't she indulge a bit? Perfect hotness engulfed her tongue. So spicy. This is great, I knew putting the level in there would work out. Did you just lick that handful of spice? A voice asked beside her. Fayette looked over and saw Mireille's disgusted face. You're just seeing things. She replied and threw the spice onto her pile. She could feel the first bits disappearing already. It made her a bit sad. Such a waste. Is something going on? Elise said, rising up from her rest. The woman seemed winded from all the rest she was taking, but that wasn't strictly true. She just had some sort of stockpiling skill for her endurance, and took care to keep it topped off. No, nothing out of order. Fayette said. How are your levels doing by the way, Elise? The woman grimaced. Not as good as you probably, but not terrible either. Killing doesn't seem to do anything for me, something I suspected. At least carrying all this stuff in dangerous situations seems to be good for it. I'm getting a decent bunch of experience. Enough chatter. Let's get moving, don't want this taking too long. Mireille said, motioning the group into action. They moved on, and kept clearing rooms of rats. Fayette found her improved spices even more effective. The rats seemed a lot more disoriented from it. Their pace increased, and she was halfway to her next level when their surroundings changed. She looked at the path in front of them. What is that? The catacombs came to an abrupt end, with an opening in the wall revealing a corridor of rough stone, sloping upwards gradually. Looks like we've reached the mines. Elise said, looking at the place thoughtfully. She sniffed at the air. But this smell. Where do I know it from? Fayette felt it too. There was a distinct odor to the air, something that didn't feel like it belonged in the catacombs or the mines. It had a twinge to it. Fayette thought it resembled the smell of failed alchemies. A weird smell, from the direction the rats are coming from. Mireille said, looking at the others meaningfully. We might be closing in on our target. Elise looked uneasy at the thought. I might have an idea. We've been heading upriver for a good while. Can we move along? I want to confirm this. Fayette quirked a brow but nodded slowly. If their local had some sort of clue on what was going on, she would welcome the info. Let's move on then. Do we go up or down the tunnel? Mireille turned to pat at the little paw prints on the ground, and her hand came off sticky. She rubbed her fingers together, looking at the sludge that had been on the floor. I think the scent is coming from this stuff. These creatures are treading it all over. She turned to look the tunnel up and down, focusing on her skill. I think, they're coming from up. Fayette walked to the front. Let's go. They crept up the tunnel, looking warily at their surroundings. However, no attacks came. No skittering shapes lunged at them, and Fayette's danger sense did not go off. It was eerie. Such peace after the constant attacks they had endured so far. The stench strengthened as they moved on, gradually becoming clearer and clearer. Elise was looking at their surroundings, deep in thought. Fayette thought she could recognize the alchemical feel of the scent more and more. Is some sinister alchemist concocting villainies here? That would be quite the story. Eventually, the shaft led to a larger room, a place that had once acted as storage. The rotted remains of shelves stood against the bare walls, while an underground stream flowed by the far wall. The scent was coming from there. The three looked at each other and nodded. They moved towards the stream, looking around carefully to make sure nothing was going to ambush them. As soon as they got close, Elise rushed forward for a closer look. It was a shallow and narrow thing, slowly flowing along through cracks in the wall. A groove had been worn into the ground by the flow, centuries of work. The water, it did not look normal. As they got their torches closer, they saw the black, tar-like substance coating it. It floated on the surface, with the idle shifts in the flow revealing the clear water beneath. Elise was staring at it furiously. She sniffed at the air carefully, then looked up the stream. Her expression was complex. Hey, Elise, Something you should be telling us. Mireille prodded. It's just, well, she looked up the stream again and pointed. I've been keeping track of where we're moving, I'm pretty confident in it. She pointed at the ceiling above. Right now, we should be around Montaigne Avenue, below the big road. Fayette looked at her blankly. So? Doesn't say much to us. Oh, right. The thing is, I'm pretty sure that this stuff. She pointed at the oily coating, then up the stream. This direction, there's not much else that way other than the factory I work at. It's like this stuff is coming from there. Mireille suddenly looked a lot more interested. So, do you know what this stuff is? Is it coming from the factory or something? Elise slowly nodded. I think I recognize this smell. It's from around the boilers, the ones which keep the big steam engines going. They burn the Magi coal there, and this stuff. She poked at the surface of the water with her finger. I think it's the runoff from that. There's a pipe from the furnaces, and they smell just like this. Fayette's first instinct was to get angry. Wait, is the factory just letting this stuff go, without a care in the world? No, wait. It could be just a leak or something. Should we report this? She turned to speak to Mireille when she saw it. It was pure luck, she almost missed it. Her danger sense was not flaring one bit, but still, a creature black as shadow was slowly rising up from the ground, right next to them. It looked like it was materializing out of the shadows. A dark shape, dripping oily tar onto the ground. Much, much larger than any rat had right to be. It got out completely, then jumped forward. Fayette's danger sense still wasn't sending any signal. Elise! Watch out! Fayette shouted, bursting into action. Not fast enough. The laborer was turning around when the creature struck her. A blow to the side, a flash of blood, and the laborer was sent tumbling down into the murky water. Chapter 27 Rat of Unusual Size. Mireille acted fast. She threw out threads at Elise's struggling figure and started wrangling her out of the water. Fayette! Take care of that thing. Fayette already had her broom out and was ready to take on it, but the creature, it had disappeared. She had only lost sight of it for a moment, and it had somehow managed to vanish. That thing, did it just appear out of the shadows? Troublesome. She scanned the dim room, but couldn't see it anywhere. She kept her broom at the ready, alert for any sudden movements. Maybe a similar strategy will work here? Those other rat creatures were also of the disappearing type. Sweep dust. As her broom touched the floor, a swirling vortex of dust gathered around it. Fayette removed her left hand from the broom, and activated spicy cooking, cranking up the spice to max hotness. She felt the spice conjure into her hand and threw it into the mix. She kept her back to Mireille, ready to cover any approach the enemy, no, the monster took. This was definitely no half-breed. Fayette kept her broom held out, and she waited. She could be patient. Her patience was rewarded. She saw the creature peek its head out from behind a rotted wooden plank and instantly sent her spicy dust towards it. The dust cloud flew, and she saw it impact the creature, revealing its full outline. It was a monstrous rat, the size of a dog. A long tail swished out behind it, and its limbs were unnaturally long, more joints than she could count. Just as Fayette got a proper look at it, it disappeared again. The dust that had adhered to it was left behind on the ground as it slid down into the shadows, fading away. Fayette cursed. Bloody hell, that had been my way of revealing these sneaks so far. Is this not going to work out? How exactly does that thing's ability work? She slowly backed away, stepping towards Mireille. The seamstress had used the fibers in Elise's clothes to thicken her thread into a proper rope and was helping the girl back on shore. It was troublesome going as she kept slipping on the tar. Fayette needed just a bit more time. She crouched down, keeping her eyes up to peer at the shadows. This monster was sneaky and vicious. It would strike if it saw an opportunity. I'll just need to give it one. She very consciously looked away, towards the oil lantern that had been left on the floor. She picked it up, making sure to be just that one bit too slow in the action. She had seen how fast the monster could move. She had also seen how her danger sense had not been enough before. Luckily, she had an extra point to spare. Skill up, danger sense has reached rank 2. A simple plan. If the current circumstances are not enough, change them. Her prediction proved true. This time, she felt her danger sense flaring. It was only a dim thing, but it was still something, so she snapped to motion like a tight wound cord. She brought her broom out for a sweeping blow and felt the impact hit the thing. Tar sloshed out, and her broom end came back wet as a shape was sent flying back into the wall. Wet from tar, sadly. No blood. Yet. Then Fayette moved even faster. She picked up the lantern, and flung it out, right at the monster. The lantern smashed on it, cracked open, and burning oil was released on top of it, lighting up the surroundings. And the monster. Fayette felt herself grin. Let's see you fade into shadows with that. She quickly glanced back at Mireille and saw that she had gotten Elise on shore. The laborer looked pale, caked in tar, and was breathing heavily. The seamstress was crouched by her side, needle in hand. Fayette quickly felt inside her apron of holding and pulled out one of the health potions she had. Mireille, catch! She shouted and tossed it back. Then she ran for the monster. She needed to finish it, quick. It was roaring out from the pain of the burns, a roar no rat should be making. However, just as Fayette got close, she saw the monster begin fading down into the ground again. It had rolled over to a spot free of burning oil, but still lit bright by it. Wait, how can it fade away there? There are no shadows there. She tried to rush forward faster and jumped in an attempt to stomp on the thing, but her foot only hit the ground. Wait, where? She began to rush back, when she felt something. Her foot came off the ground sticky. She looked down quickly and saw why this spot on the floor was still clear of burning oil, despite the flames right next to it. There was some sort of black tar on the ground, right by the spot where the creature had disappeared. Is it? She whirled around, looking back at the spot where she had first seen the monster. Now that she knew what she was looking for, she could spot it right away, a spot of sludge exactly where it had appeared. She had thought the ability was fading into shadows, but that had been wrong. It's moving from tarry sludge spot to tarry sludge spot. Fayette smiled. The fight had just been simplified a lot. A monster challenging a maid to a fight of cleaning? This, she could handle. She now knew what she needed to do, so she didn't hesitate. She threw her broom away and took her mop and all-purpose cleaner out. In barely 2 seconds, she was armed properly, mop dripping with the hissing acid. She started cleaning. First, she handled the spot right below her. The tar sizzled as her cleaner hit it, and she saw it come off the floor, leaving the ground spotless. Excellent. She then ran to the other side of the room and started clearing up the various spots of sludge, slowly moving away from Mireille. Now that she knew her targets, she could see the tar everywhere in the room. It was in all sorts of nooks and crannies, hidden in the shadows. It didn't seem natural, the splotches were too even, too identical. They were clearly the result of some ability. If it's an ability, there has to be a limit. She moved forward to the next spot and finally saw the creature make another move. It was running away now, spitting out globs of tar as it scurried towards the other side of the room. Whenever a glob landed, it would melt away to the ground and emerge from the new spot. Pathetic. As soon as you are figured out, you try to run? This is already over. Fayette chased it, clearing away all the spots as she moved, and it became a test of speed. Fayette's mop against the monster's tar and, well, Fayette's cleaning didn't require ability use at this point. The monster's tar did. The speed difference was evident. It had to wait 10 seconds between each glob, while Fayette could clean away things as fast as her feet could move. She inevitably gained on the creature, just a bit more between every glob, and soon it was within her sights. It spun around and spit out one last glob, this time right at Fayette's face. She intercepted with her mop. The glob sizzled against her mop, vanishing away, and she kept her mop moving forward, right to the monster. It connected, a sizzling sounded out, and she pushed, pinning the creature down on the floor. She held the acidic mop against the creature, slowly but surely letting it melt down. The creature screamed out in pain and tried to struggle, tarry limbs writhing to get a grip on the floor, but it didn't work. Fayette's hold was too strong. She relished in the sound of it sizzling away, as she slowly pushed her mop further down. Then, there was a sudden moment when the sound stopped. The resistance under her mop faded away, and it hit the ground as the creature melted down into blood. A stark black monster core was left behind. That was a big piece of trash. Nice. Progress towards next level, 90%. Fayette took a careful look around to make sure the matter was settled properly. She saw no further sludge in the room, nor any other moving rats. Seems we're clear. She then moved back towards Mireille. The seamstress was supporting Elise by the back, holding her steady. Elise looked wan and wilted, shaking as if struck by frost. The rags tied by her waist were red from blood, and black from something worse. Muriel had gotten a lot of the sludge off, but Elise was still far from cleared. Fayette winced internally at the mess. As Fayette approached, Mireille shook her head and handed the potion back. Fayette felt the thrill of battle fate as she realized the situation was not quite clear. Not yet. This looks bad, we'll have to see a doctor. Chapter 28 The Doctor. Elise looked ragged. Her gown had been torn at the thigh, and the wound she bore there looked nasty. Mireille seemed to have managed to stop the bleeding, but the larger issue may have been the tar the woman had been dropped in. Fayette wasn't too keen on finding out what it would do to a human after seeing the rats. She accepted the healing potion from Mireille and saw that the level of the fluid had not dropped at all. She turned to Mireille, frowning. You didn't use the potion. The seamstress shook her head. No, we can't risk using it with who knows what getting in her body. It might enhance whatever she's been infected with. Elise, can you walk? The laborer was breathing heavily and winced as she took a step forward. She almost stumbled down, but Mireille held her up. The woman gritted her teeth. If you can support me just a bit, I think I should be able to move. Fayette nodded, then picked up their remaining lantern and began leading the group forward, back the way they had come. You said something about seeing a doctor? Where are we headed? Elise coughed into her hand, and after a quick struggle managed to speak up. Dr. Nightingale. She's the one who's been looking after Mother, and a lot of the other sick folk in our district. You saw her before. For just a moment at least. She looked nervously between her escorts. She might be a bit eccentric. But she has a good heart. She really does know what she's doing. I think. Well, this doctor of yours sounds like quite the character. Mireille said as she supported Elise's walk down the mine shaft. Fayette stopped to pick up the monster core left by the rat monster, and put it in her bag, among her other shiny treasures. Her collection had been growing a lot recently, but thankfully her apron of holding was making it a lot easier to carry around. They were soon back in the catacombs and speeding back down the way they had come. Fayette kept a watchful eye out, but no enemies made an appearance. She wasn't sure what she thought of that. Did we get enough of them, or did getting the big one do something, or are they just now wary of us? I wonder. I would like to make sure they are actually cleared out. Never let the rats spread. Their path back was an easy one, though they had to hop over the odd wire here and there traps Mireille had set for the rats if any tried to circle back on them. Fayette was just a tad happy that the rooms were noticeably cleaner than on their arrival. She would have liked to stay behind and do a proper deep clean, but, well, some things could wait. She felt a bit of guilt as she observed Elise's hobbling gait. I don't think she would have come here if I didn't want to do this rat-clearing mission, and I had a large part in making sure she came along. If Mireille alone could have decided, would she have left her behind? Well, whatever. What's done is done. It would be better to channel my energy into more useful things. She gripped her broom tighter. Like this damn factory situation. Seriously, what are they thinking? Is this an accidental thing, or do they know? This has to have been going on for a while, right? Fayette began growing more and more annoyed at the textile mill, which was behind this whole affair, and barely noticed the rest of their trip out the catacombs. It was just such a stupid thing even level 1 maids knew to not dump trash in the neighborhood. They were soon standing back above the streets, and Elise began guiding them to their destination. It was late evening, and their group drew quite a few stares. A maid and seamstress with blood and signs of fighting on their clothes, and the injured, tar-covered woman they were helping along. It made for quite the unusual group. Fayette had maids poised to compose herself against the stares, but the others did not. Mireille visibly grew skittish, keeping her head down while occasionally casting quick glances around. Elise meanwhile began groaning, not in pain, well, not in any physical pain at least. Oh, no, this is going to be the talk of town for months. For her, many of the stares were familiar faces. This was her district, and she visibly grimaced at every familiar face. Fayette felt reassured by that. If the woman had the energy to be annoyed by something so mundane, and was hardy enough to get some blush on her cheeks, her injury couldn't be that bad, right? Their path through the streets only took them a bit under 10 minutes, mainly due to Elise's slow pace. Soon they were standing by an unassuming house. Fayette had expected some sort of more official place, one with a plaque proudly saying Dr. Nightingale on the front. This house, however, was downright decrepit. It looked like it had been abandoned to the winds for a good while, before someone had moved in and began fixing things up. Flaky paint revealed the rotted wood under it, and the window was a cracked mess still somehow intact. It wasn't exactly the type of place Fayette had pictured for their doctor of choice. Mireille looked at Elise, a disbelieving look on her face. The laborer only shrugged. Look, I know what it looks like, but this is the place. She does really know what she's doing. The more official types don't come down here. All right, Mireille said, looking apprehensive. Still, they had a patient in need of treatment, and Elise's face had been growing more pale as they had walked. They couldn't waste any more time, so the seamstress knocked on the door. At first there was no response, but soon sounds of clattering could be heard from inside. The crashing came closer, and the door opened. Fayette's nose was overwhelmed by a strong smell of alcohol. She had briefly seen her before, but this was the first time Fayette got a proper look at the doctor. The woman who looked at them from the doorway looked young, but Fayette's first impression was just how dark she seemed. Oh, she was rather pale, truth be told, but she was wearing a stark all-black dress, and the gloom from inside the house almost made her fade into the shadows. Her dark hair was tied up in a tangled mess, but Fayette felt the most notable features were her eyes. Her eyes were sunken. Surrounded by deep rings of dark, they hinted at many restless nights. Those eyes took in the scene quickly, and the woman's face instantly turned serious when she saw Elise. You brought a patient? All right, inside. Don't touch anything. Her speech had just a hint of an Albion accent to it, which Fayette had expected based on her name. Nightingale. Not a surname from this side of the channel. Still, Fayette felt reassured at the curt, professional tone. As a very professional maid, she could of course recognize the tone of a professional. Her relief did not last long. As she stepped through the dark doorway, it was like she was stepping into her worst nightmare. Everything was splayed out everywhere, with no rhyme or reason to the order. Plates with half-eaten food left on them were on the floor, and bottles filled with dubious liquids were strewn all about. She was pretty sure half of the cutlery in use here were actual surgery instruments, and not proper knives. Worst of all, the doctor had just instructed her to not touch anything. A messy place she was not allowed to clean up at all. Fayette stepped further into her own personal hell. This is for Elise, I will bear with this. She focused on using Maid's poise to its fullest extent and took care to keep her gaze forward. The less she saw, the better. Focus on Elise, focus on Elise, focus on Elise. The mantras she ran through her mind helped her calm down a bit. Just being aware of the mess all around made her skin crawl and prickle. She was only dimly aware of them being led into a dim room that was marginally clearer than the others, where Elise was laid down on a bed. Fayette felt like she was in a trance as she watched the doctor start undressing the wound. She carefully opened up the stitches Mireille had made, then peered in. Her grimace was answer enough as to the state of things. She took up a clear bottle and splashed some of the liquid within on the wound. Elise flinched slightly at the stinging but did not cry out. The doctor then took out some measuring instruments, tried Elise's pulse, listened to her breathing using some queer instrument, took a swig from the clear bottle. Wait, what? Fayette's trance was broken as she doubted what she had just seen. Did that woman just drink from? No, it must have been my imagination. Fayette almost fell back into the trance, before Mireille tapped her on the shoulder. Did you see that? Did she just drink from that? The same thing she put on the wound. Fayette blinked her eyes, slowly regaining focus. Oh, I thought I saw something like that. It smells like alcohol in here, do you think she? The doctor whirled around from Elise and gave the two a glare. No backchat in my clinic. I'm the professional here. I need to focus. Fayette and Mireille nodded silently at her, and after looking at them for a few seconds, the woman turned back to her examinations. She took another swig from the bottle. Mireille could not stay her tongue. She leaned over and kept her voice quiet and low. There, you saw it too, right? She really did drink from that. Fayette slowly nodded, then whispered back, even quieter. Is she really a doctor? I've seen a few. They visited the old lord and they were very different. All fancy talk and noses held up. Do you think she's really licensed? The word license seemed to trigger some deep, instinctive reaction in the dark-clad doctor, and she again whirled to look back at them. Fayette and Mireille both did their best to look innocent, and after a few moments the woman turned back. Fayette and Mireille looked at each other and nodded. Yep, definitely not. Still, they didn't talk more. The woman was evidently sharper than she looked. Despite the disorder in the room, she never hesitated in her movements. She walked in one corner, grabbed an instrument off the floor, made some measurement with it, grabbed some cylindrical tube on the way. Her motion was practiced and efficient, and Fayette could recognize that the woman did really seem to have not just skills, but also actual, genuine skill. She has to be above level 15, or at least very close to it. License or not, she is no novice. Suddenly, the doctor stopped her measurements, stood up and looked around the room with a grave expression. Her voice was ice cold. Looks like a bad case of monocorruption, blood poisoning and various other nasty afflictions. Fayette shivered as she met the gloomy woman's eyes. It starts off mild, then growing fever followed by internal bleeding, eventually causing massive hemorrhage. Death in around 36 hours. Fayette felt a shock go through her. Elise didn't look that bad. Is she going to die or something? That can't be. She started standing up. What can we do? Shush. The doctor hissed as she whirled at Fayette. Fayette shut her mouth. Do not interrupt me. The doctor said, maintaining the stare. After a moment, the doctor nodded. I can of course cure it. Fayette felt herself slip back down to her seat. She slowly drew her gaze back up to the stoic doctor. Why didn't she open with that? She made it sound so ominous. Probably. The doctor added, returning to work. Elise met Fayette's eyes and shrugged. For a moment they shared that silent connection of workers, and the maid could almost read her thoughts. It is what it is, but she does usually do good work. Chapter 29 Let's burn down the factory. Fayette had been curious about how a doctor would cure such a thing, especially as she had made it sound so fatal. She was however not quite ready for the gloomy woman to cut up a new wound right next to the infected one, releasing a stream of blood. Elise however didn't even cry out, and seemed to treat the act as normal, so the maid held back her impulse. Right, don't hit the doctor with a broom to the head. I guess this is normal? Do you really need to cut her up like that? She's lost blood already. Stop prattling about, or I'll clear you out of my clinic. The doctor said, not moving her gaze from the flow of blood. It's just some bloodletting. I'm getting the poisons and infections out. Fayette slowly sat down and decided to empty her mind for the rest of this doctor visit. It was evidently all a bit too much to take in. The rest of the treatment didn't take long, and soon Fayette and Mireille were sitting by Elise's bedside, as the doctor cleaned her implements nearby. Elise still looked weak, but her breathing had steadied, and a healthier color had returned to her cheeks. With the injuries handled for now, they finally had time to discuss the matters they had found out. So, Fayette began. You're sure that it was runoff from your factory that you fell into? That stuff is turning rats into monsters. Elise was quiet for a moment, and the only sound in the room was the steady clanging of the doctor handling her gear. Eventually, the laborer spoke up. I'm relatively certain. I work near the boilers often, and the smell is unmistakable. I haven't encountered anything similar elsewhere. And the location, it was just in the right place. That can't be a coincidence. Do you think it's a leak in the machinery? Mireille asked, gaze hard. Or, is this something intentional? Do they know what that stuff is doing? We would have to ask around. I'm not sure. Elise answered. Though, seeing how the upper management acts, I wouldn't be too surprised. The factory is actually a bit up on the higher ground, on the other side of the ridge. Getting that stuff over to this side would take some effort. Or a really unlucky accident. Can it be a coincidence that it all flows right into the poorer districts? Mireille asked, looking at Elise meaningfully. Fayette felt her emotions flaring the more she learned. Could someone really be so careless, so thoughtless, care so little for their workers? Fayette however knew. She had felt how a lord had gripped her soul and tossed it away like trash. She knew what these people were capable of. This couldn't continue. She began running through her options. Can we tell someone about this? This can't be allowed to continue. Who is in charge of the city? If we let them know, maybe this can be resolved. They'll put a stop to it. Elise shook her head, eyes listless. Fayette, the owner of the factory, is the lord of the city, Lord Aumont. He owns almost all the factories in the city. A year back, there was some talk of workers walking out because he cut pay, but they were all let off, some even imprisoned. He doesn't take half measures. Fayette grinned her teeth. Why did things have to be so complicated? A silence fell to the group, as they mulled over the issue. It was too silent though. The three soon realized that a sound had stopped. The doctor was no longer clinking about with her tools or walking through the room. Fayette turned to look her way, and saw the woman was frozen in place, trembling slightly. The dark-clad woman slowly turned around, revealing a grim expression. She was not blinking at all, eyes bloodshot. Please do continue. Do tell me more. She said, voice biting as winter frost. She began stomping closer. Tell me more about how this factory of yours is pouring this poisonous filth right into this district. She said, voice rising with every step. This district where I've tirelessly been fighting the sickness, helping people withstand it. She got to the group and stopped right by Elise's bedside. Her voice fell back down in intensity, a calm river once more. Go on, I've half a mind to burn down that factory myself. Mireille gulped. The intense glare was worse than anything she had faced at the orphanage. Well, we discovered some stuff being put into the water around here. It was down in the catacombs, and maybe it's from the factory, and maybe... Is that what did her in? The doctor asked, pointing at Elise. Mireille nodded. Yes, she fell into a stream of that stuff with an open wound. The doctor's brow grew more furrowed, and her eyes seemed to sink deeper inside their sockets. It was almost like a dark aura had begun emanating from her. She looked to Fayette. The symptoms match up quite well with what's been going around in this district. A milder version though, the one people here have been catching isn't deadly. At least in the short run. We're still not sure it's intentional, Mireille tried, shrinking under the doctor's intense glare. It could be an accident. The doctor scoffed. Humph. A foolish hope. It wouldn't be the first time I've seen something similar to this, but feel free to entertain your fancies. She pointed at Elise. You, girl. You work at that place, right? Surely you can manage something to figure it out. The source of all this. My sister's husband, Antoine, is a builder. Didn't work on my factory, but he might know someone who did. The doctor nodded and went to take up a paper and pen. She handed them to the laborer. All right. Write out your request. I'll make sure it's sent out, and we'd better have answers within the hour. Elise took the pen into her shaking hand and began scribbling a quick message on it. She then handed it to the doctor. The gloomy woman picked it up, parsed through it quick, then nodded. All right. This should go to your house, right? I remember it. Yes. My sister should be home by now, she'll know what to do. The doctor nodded, then walked off outside the room. A tense silence fell as the group waited for her to get back, but she was only gone a few minutes. She returned soon, carrying some notes. All right, I've sent a street runner. They work fast for me. I made sure he understood the urgency, we'll know soon. Are you really sure we should get involved in this, Faye? Mireille asked, biting her lip. This is serious. Big. Noble business, city business. We signed up to deal with some rats, not whatever this is. Fayette closed her eyes to think. It was true, dealing with this was not what she had signed up for initially, and certainly not hunter business. But, was this not what she had been planning all along? She had wanted to be a maid who would not settle for just cleaning up a lonely mansion, but one who would pursue something grander. Wouldn't something like this fit that bill exactly? A huge factory, polluting a whole district. Certainly work worth a maid of her ambitions. Just how much experience could I gain from something like this, especially if I solved it directly? Should we even tell others? She opened her eyes, then met Mireille's. I want to do this. I think this type of thing was what I wanted, in that talk we had in the sauna. Besides, we are already plenty involved. The seamstress sighed. I'm not surprised, to be honest, but I do think this is rash. We might end up in real trouble here. If we do something, we only do it with a good plan. So you'll also help? Fayette asked, smile peeking through her lips. What? Were I to leave you, you'd be sure to do something proper rash and unthought, and probably get killed doing it. Can't leave you alone, can I? I do wish I was getting paid for this, though. I'm sure you'll get the rat money. Elise offered. Mireille raised an eyebrow. Hardly enough to compensate this. Well, whatever. Let's see what the truth of matters is first. Just then, as if on call, a knock sounded out from the door. Fayette was impressed. Did the message get sent out and received that quickly? Can word travel that fast in cities? The doctor walked off to open the door, and soon led a gruff-looking man back. Broad shoulders, a thick mustache and worn worker's overalls, the very image of a typical builder. The man's brow quirked up when he saw the injured laborer laying on the bed. Elise? The message didn't say anything about an injury. What's happened? That's irrelevant. The doctor said, cutting him off with a wave of her hand. Her condition is stable, and we need information. The man looked a bit confused, but slowly nodded. All right. Does her family know about this? What did you call me here for? Were you one of the builders who worked on the factory where Elise works? Mireille asked. Is that the one by Castagnari Crossing? The textile works or something of the sort? Yes, I was there for the whole time. Mireille turned to Elise. I don't know the specifics well enough, you ask the rest. Elise thought for a moment, then started speaking slowly. You know that one pipe in the boiler room, which the runoff travels through. Where does it lead? The builder thought for a moment, then shook his head. I don't know about that one. They had two teams building stuff there, one was locals doing most stuff, then there was a group brought in, apparently some personal group of the lords, out-of-town people. They handled more sensitive stuff, we weren't allowed to see much of that. The doctor slowly looked at the other three women, meeting each of their eyes. So, does this not sound very convenient? Hey? What's this about? The man asked. Nothing you need to worry about. The doctor answered, then waved her hand towards the door. Off with you now. We have things to discuss. What? But Elise. When I say off, I mean off. The man squirmed under the doctor's gaze, then slowly slunk out of the room, and out of the house. The doctor waited for him to go, then took out a flask of clear liquid from a pocket, and took a good drink from it. Fayette turned to the doctor. So, we're definitely doing something. You in, Miss Nightingale? The doctor grimaced. Please don't be so formal with me. But yes, I am in. Call me Olivia. Fayette nodded, then began to think through the options. A factory was not handling its trash properly, and she could think of one simple solution. All right, that settles it. Let's burn down the factory. Three silent gazes answered her. New party member acquired. Olivia Nightingale. Class, Doctor ? Level, ? Skills. Surgery, ? Bloodletting, rank ? Medicine, ? Capstone skills, ? Free skills, ? Chapter 30. Fayette liked direct methods. A factory was doing nasty stuff? Simple, get rid of it. Need to get rid of something? Simple, fire. However, the reaction from the others was not quite what she had been expecting. 3 silent stares were all she got for her proposal. Eventually, Mireille sighed deeply. Faye, we can't just burn down the factory. What? Why not? Fayette shut her eyes, thought for a moment, then snapped her fingers. Oh, right, of course. Because it's made of brick, right? I don't think you can burn brick. No. That's not the issue here. It would be like a really big deal. Smashing the whole place up would have us all caught in moments. How would we even do that? Well, something has to be done to stop this. You have a better idea? Maybe a bomb. Elise slowly raised her hand, a nervous look on her face. Excuse me, stupid question. She flinched back a bit, gulping under Fayette's enthusiastic stare. If you bomb, burn, whatever else to destroy the factory, where am I going to work? Fayette blinked her eyes, disbelieving. Your own mother is sick, probably because of that stuff your factory is pumping out. Are you seriously saying that? The laborer shifted uncomfortably on her bed, gripped her braid, pulled it taut, and lowered her gaze. Well, yet. I know. It's frustrating, but it's also true. Work is short out here, and we really do need it. A lot of people will end up on the streets if it shuts down. What if we just spread the word? If people knew, we could make them stop. Olivia scoffed. A risky effort, that. I've dealt with highborn. A lord as high up as ours here can't have news getting out that his factory would do something like this. Once his people get one whiff of word spreading, the hammer gets brought down, hard. Can he really do something like that? Mireille asked. Workers from his own factory are being affected, right? Surely he can't brush off poisoning them. You would have a point were the situation more acute, but right now it's not serious enough for that. Olivia answered. What do you mean? 2 factors. 1. The illness is not that severe in the short term. People fall sick for a few weeks, then eventually get better, building a tolerance. The young and hardy don't get affected much at all. This type of thing doesn't really get nasty until the long term. Mireille nodded. All right, that makes sense. The second reason. Olivia gestured outside her window. It's only affecting one segment of this one district. Patients are found on a long, but narrow tract, which expands as it nears the river. If it comes to it, the factory can just fire everyone from here, and hire from elsewhere. There are lots of people in need of work. It would hurt for a bit, but their machines don't really need high levels to work. Fayette frowned. It sounded like all their problems were coming from one source. Isn't this simple? She asked. The others turned to look at her, and she raised her hand in a lecturing manner. We have a bad boss here, causing trouble and doing bad things. I've been in that situation before. Just kill them and get some new work. It's worked well enough for me. Elise gasped in horror. Kill him? You can't just kill a lord. Fayette shook her head. Actually, you can. It's not really that difficult, much easier than monsters to be honest. Just take a blunt object and... Mireille interrupted. She had a palm to her face and was frowning deep. We really don't want to make murdering lords a habit, all right? Out in the countryside with a minor lord there were less eyes and such, but this is a big city, and the man probably has a formidable defense. Also, if he just went and died, you can bet all possible measures would be taken. We would have a lot of people after us. Fayette frowned. Things were getting a bit too complicated and weird again. She hummed for a moment. So, I guess it's back to burning down the factory then. No. We are not doing that. Enough with the fire. Olivia slammed her fist on the table, getting everyone's attention. If not fire, what? Something has to be done. Something immediate. I'm done letting this fester now that I know the cause. She turned her gaze around the room, meeting everyone's eyes. It will stop. Mireille shut up for a moment, then slowly nodded. All right, you are right. We're just going in circles right now. We need to plan. Whatever we are going to do, it's not going to be simple. She looked around the room. Do you have drawing supplies somewhere? Ink and a board, or something else? Olivia frowned but did not rebuke the question. She walked off, shifted through a few piles of junk, then came back with a wooden board, a quill, and some ink. Mireille accepted them, propped up the board on a table against the wall, and started drawing. She first drew a fat man with a top hat sitting atop a factory, then a pipe leading out of the factory, then a district at the end of the pipe. Fayette thought the drawings were just a bit too cute for a serious planning session like this. Mireille trailed her quill on the pipe from the factory to the district. So, we need to stop this whole process at some point here. Do you have any ideas? You sure we can't just sabotage the factory directly? The doctor asked. Mireille sighed. We've been over this. Whatever we do it can't be too obvious. Then do you have something better to offer? A longer pipe? You know that's stupid. It's hard, alright? A good answer won't come immediately. Olivia and Mireille fell into a debate, thinking on the merits of various plans, while Elise interjected here and there. Fayette really didn't care for it. It was all getting so complicated. Why does this have to be such a pain? They're trashing the place, but we can't stop them because people need to work on their trash the place machines so they can live in the trashed place? What the hell is this? No sense at all. She started to get angry. When things at the mansion started getting bad, the solution had been simple: get rid of the man in charge and ditch the place. But now, all of a sudden she wasn't being allowed to go give the Lord a good broomful of justice. Stupid city. Stupid Lord and stupid factories. This is what happens when people don't hire enough maids. Trash just piles up and nobody takes care of it. Irritated, she slammed her fist on the wall, interrupting the debate the others were having. I wish we could just make the Lord and his ilk take care of it. If only we could, like, move the trash to those who are making it. I bet that would have them thinking twice. Mireille looked at Fayette, amused. Faye, you know we can't just... Wait. Elise interrupted. Her face was thoughtful, measuring. Mireille turned to her, quirking a brow. What, does that plan actually make sense to you? Don't be silly. The laborer shook her head. No, it's... You remember, the factory is high up on the ridge, right? It's actually located just slightly on the other side, the rich side. She pointed at the image of the pipe on the board. That's why they need that whole pipe set up. If they just let that stuff off right there, on site, it would naturally flow down, towards the better folks' side. Mireille tapped her quill on the board. So, you're saying that if we just, say, punch a hole in the pipe somewhere, she crossed out a segment, our problem would be solved? It would flow away down from here, to the other side. Elise nodded. At least I think so. It would make sense. Things flow down, right? Fayette smiled. This was more like it: let the ones responsible deal with it. I like this plan. Is this okay with you, Doctor? Or is it bad to let the factory run and keep polluting? It would be going in a better direction. The doctor wasn't quite smiling, but the savage gleam in her eye was answer enough. I have no opposition to something like this. And please, call me Olivia. Mireille still looked skeptical. All right, so we do something to change where all that nastiness goes, fine. Won't someone notice? Also, how will we be doing this? Get some workers to sabotage it. Olivia shook her head. Risky letting word of our operation spread too much, especially to workers at the factory. Their foreman might have some loyalty check skill, those are not uncommon. We might be discovered. Elise raised her hand. What about me then? I know about this stuff now. Olivia looked at her, and poked at the laborer's injury, causing her to wince. You're not going to directly participate in this with injuries like that. By the time you're back to work, it should have been long enough. You should be distanced from whatever has happened. Mireille grimaced, then drew 3 stick figures at the bottom of the board. One with a frilly apron and broom, one with a surgeon's knife, and one with a long, pointy needle. So it's going to be us 3 who do this then? Any ideas on execution? Fayette first looked around the supplies strewn throughout the room, then turned to the doctor. Olivia, do you have any alchemy supplies? I have an alchemy skill, maybe we could make a bomb, and clear out a new path for the runoff. Like, blast a hole into the pipe and ground. Yes, I do have supplies. And an alchemy skill of my own. That sounds difficult. Elise said. It's going to make noise, doing something like that. Won't people want to investigate such a thing, and then discover what you've done? Everyone turned silent for a moment, pondering over the issue. Finally, Mireille spoke up. I think we'll need a distraction. People will know that something has happened, but if we fool them into thinking we're after something completely different, they might overlook everything else. Especially if we mask our tracks carefully, and make sure the breach in the pipe doesn't get noticed. Olivia frowned. How would that work, in practice? Mireille drew an explosion over a segment of a pipe, then tapped at it. As you said, this is going to make noise. People will notice something has happened. So she moved her quill towards the factory, to a corner as far from the pipe as possible, then drew a plume of smoke. We make them think something completely different is happening. Fayette suddenly grew more enthusiastic. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I think that's a saying. Are we back to the burn things down plan? Mireille nodded. Well, yet. A bit at least. So, an explosion happens in one place, makes a bunch of noise, then smoke starts coming from somewhere else. A simple misdirect. Then we, I don't know, steal some important looking papers or something like that. They'll think that's what it's all about, then we take care, and cover our actual tracks carefully. Fayette started taking out her alchemy supplies, ready to get to work. This sounds good, let's do it. Olivia, can I see what you have? Elise tried to stand up on the bed but winced back down from the pain. Sorry for not being of help here. Relax. Fayette said, standing up and placing a comforting arm on the woman's shoulder. She pointed at herself. I'm a professional, I'll make sure this will get handled. Elise first looked doubtful. But... She ran her eyes over the group. A maid, a seamstress and a doctor. A motley party that really didn't look like it belonged together, but there was something there. Some type of strength she didn't believe she yet had. I guess you really will do this. It's actually going to happen. For some reason she believed.